Namaste, and welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Serenity. This morning, I am going to answer a question that was asked to me. I'm not going to pull a question from the jar, but I'm going to answer a question that was asked for me, and that really got me thinking. The question I was recently asked was, do you believe in magic? It was a person asking me my personal belief about magic. And my first response is going to be yes, an astounding yes, I believe in magic. But that answer is not sufficient for you because of the relativity of the question. What is meant by belief and what is meant by this term magic? So when you ask me if I believe it, well, maybe your interpretation of what belief is and your interpretation of what magic is totally different than mine. So the answer I give you may not suffice. Does that make sense? Let's look at those words a little bit, because again, words are just symbols or pointers pointing us to something deeper. What does the word belief mean to you? You're going to say belief. In many people, it's a conviction of truth. We believe to be true. A belief is something we believe to be true, and then we hold on to it. Belief is just a conditioned experience that we hold on to. Belief is just dogma and doctrine that we were convinced or conditioned or taught to believe is true. It is not necessarily truth, is it? Belief is just a wannabe truth. It's a holding on to something that will allow us to feel better in believing it is true or assuming it is true. So it's an assumption. It's a hypothesis. It is not a proven, validated, substantial evidence, is it? No, belief is just an idea we have of what truth might be. It is not a knowing, and it is not truth. It is just an assumption of a knowing and of truth. So we have to keep that in mind too. So belief is just that. It doesn't prove anything. A belief does not prove anything. A scientist's belief in something that leads to scientific investigation is a hypothesis, is it not? It's an experimental hypothesis, an experimental theory about how something might be. And then the scientist sets off to prove that theory is true, to gain the evidence necessary to go from belief to knowing. And very seldom, even after rigorous scientific evidence and scientific experimentation, do scientists ever go beyond a hypothesis to a knowing. They get into a theory and they have some validation for their theory, but is it proven as reality? Someone else could come around and debunk it altogether and do another experiment that debunks it. And that's what happens with science. You have this experimentation going on and this published experimentation with the result findings. Someone will come along to debunk that in some way, to say, no, that's not true, or that's not valid because, and they'll do a set of experiments or whatever, or literature review or something to debunk what this particular scientist did in their proving of the truth or their belief system, or they're trying to take their belief beyond belief to knowing. So again, belief is just an assumption of the truth. So if you ask me if I believe in magic, I assume magic is real. That doesn't mean I'm convinced. You could prove me otherwise. I have a very, very scientific mind. I like scientific validation. I tend to go to scientific validation when I talk about these things that are, I'm going to use the term metaphysical, and we're going to explain it later on, metaphysical, because I like some scientific validation. Belief is also often used to make us feel better inside. Belief is something sometimes that we'll say, okay, I get comforted in assuming this reality. I get comforted in believing this is true. I find comfort in a certain amount of peace, thinking that there is magic in the world, It gives me hope. It gives me, it fills my gut with a little bit of excitement and enthusiasm. So that belief also has a tendency to comfort us, and that's why we cling to our beliefs and our convictions so much, and why we defend them so rigorously and so adamantly when someone comes along and pokes at those beliefs, because they have become our paradigm of reality. This is how we see the world. We found a comforting way to look out at the world, make sense of it, And if it gives us comfort and it presents, a sense of safety and security in this world, if someone comes around and starts poking at our version of reality, our belief systems, what's going to happen? Oh my gosh, no, you're wrong. And we're going to either defend vigorously our belief system without actually hearing the other side or what the other person is saying, the evidence provided that might debunk what we're believing. We push it away. We just say, no, it's not real, can't be, so I'm not going to hear it. Or we push it away, or we get terrified of it because we just don't want it. So we might attack the person who is trying to play with our belief system, who is beginning to show evidence that what I believed and that what gave me comfort and that made my world make sense might not be real. There might be another way of looking at this, and that other way is going to throw up my mental paradigm so much and my version of reality so much that it's going to be too uncomfortable for me. And my version of self may collapse, and my version of what I've known to be true may collapse that I've been clinging to. And if I've been clinging to it, it's also a version of me, right? So we have that reaction of defense and attack often when people come and challenge our belief systems. Now that's very important to know because that shows you what happens when it comes to this idea of magic, okay? This idea of supernatural phenomenon. We'll talk about those words. The metaphysical, the paranormal or parapsychology, supernatural. All those, that super and the meta and the para, all meaning above, beyond, behind, or whatever, that which we come to know as natural, normal, psychology, or physics, because that's how our worldview was. We found our safety in these scientific principles, and now someone's going to come around and say there's something beyond the scientific, beyond what I've come to see as true in my 20th century thinking, or 21st century thinking. What is going on here? And that's what happens. That's why we have defense and attack when it comes to the word magic, right? Why it's so hard for us to absorb that super part of supernatural, or that para part of paranormal, or that meta part of metaphysics. It's taken us beyond what we have come to understand as truth, and that we have found a certain sense of security in. Okay. That being said, belief then is an assumption of reality. It's constantly, and any assumption has to constantly be put through the experimental process. It has to be questioned. It has to be tested and validated over and over and over and over again in the hope that someday it will become a known truth. And it's that challenging to just even look at the word believe then. When you ask me the question, do I believe in magic? Well, I have to go through all of that to say, yes, I believe in magic. Now let's look at the word magic. Magic. From the beginning of time, magic was in the form of alchemy, for example, was an accepted practice of living amongst the peoples in this world. They believed and heard and talked to and worshipped and honored and got help and support from and, lived their lives according to these things that cannot be picked up with the five senses. And when we say metaphysical, that's what it means, right? They cannot be picked up with the five senses, the physical senses. They're things we cannot see necessarily, things we cannot feel necessarily, things we cannot hear, things we cannot touch, things that are not made of matter. They are not physical. Well, we even know with matter, right, that 99.5% of matter is just empty space. Dark matter, as the scientists would say. It originates from dark matter, originates from dark matter. We don't understand what dark matter is. We don't understand what the space is within us. We just know that, if you broke the body down and you broke it down into its organ levels and its tissue levels and its cellular levels, and from the cellular levels to the molecular levels, and from the molecular levels to the atomic levels, and from the atomic levels to the subatomic levels, and you looked around the electrons and whatnot, you would come to see quarks and leptons and bosons and this vibrating energy that is not even matter yet. It's not matter until it is observed a lot of times. And we've seen that in the double slit theory in quantum physics and all that. But so we have this vibrating waves of energy that are not matter. We have this spaciousness that cannot be picked up easily with the five senses yet, because we don't have the scientific tools yet to measure it. And that's why we're just developing those tools now, like with CERN in Switzerland, that allow the protons to collide from a great distance. Those things took eons to develop so that we could see this as truth, right? And we're developing more and more scientific materials and instruments so that we can even go deeper and deeper into understanding what this empty space is. But for now, even the boson, the Higgs particle, that Higgs field, that was an amazing, a very, very amazing scientific discovery that made us question again our connection and conviction that matter is all there is, right? So it led the scientists to go beyond their own scientific ideations to explore deeper. And that's what happens with science. The more you explore physics, the more you have the opportunity to go beyond physics, as Einstein did, In his letters to Spinoza, he was very clear about saying that he believed there was more to life. Or Spinoza, his belief in Spinoza, but his letter to a friend about Spinoza. He was very clear in saying how he knew that it went beyond science. There's something about life and consciousness that goes way beyond what we can see in physical matter. He was adamant about that. Physicists will argue that no, he had no spiritual inclinations, but just read anything Einstein wrote, and after a bit, you see this parallel. Even Aristotle, when he started, was it Aristotle or Plato? Who wrote the treatises? It might have been Aristotle. I'm sorry, I'm getting those early philosophers mixed up. But it was either Aristotle or Plato that wrote the treatises. And they started out wanting to understand physics. They were very keen on physics and the physical matter. In physics, we talk about physical matter and how it works and what's generating it, where's the energy field come from, and all that. And they then developed treatises, or books that came after the physical books. So after the study of physical, he went on to study that which was moving the physical, that which cannot be seen with the physical senses. So we see that a lot with science. We see scientists who go deeper and deeper and deeper. Well, where do they get back to? They get back to what the ancient rishis understood eons and eons ago by studying in those caves and being secluded and isolated for days to weeks to months, understanding the human mind and understanding consciousness by going inward rather than outward into the physical world. So it was a form of metaphysics, but it was an inner, not beyond or behind type of physical understanding. And that's what science is getting back to. The more they explore the physical, the more they get beyond the physical. As any scientific investigation should do, it should take you one step beyond what is obvious. Should it not? It should always, the questioning mind should always take us one step beyond what is obvious. We have to go beyond our convictions and our beliefs that something is a certain way, proving that it is or it isn't, questioning constantly instead of protecting those beliefs at all costs, which stunts our growth scientifically, which stunts the scientific investigating mind. It stunts our understanding of reality when we hold on to our beliefs that it can't be. It just goes against my theories and my ideas and experiments I'm looking at that have already been done, using the materials and the instruments that are, are only advanced enough to understand what I've come up with in these experimentations. So we have that, holding on to that with such conviction and attacking anyone who tries to disturb our belief system. And that causes what? Rifts in science. It causes the hard problem of consciousness coming about, where you have this conflicting belief systems and saying, consciousness is within the mind. No. Consciousness is outside the mind. Consciousness is that which we cannot understand, that allows matter to move or do what it does. And so we see that. We see those conflicting beliefs and that clashing of different sciences, instead of science working together to explore and question and prove and not cling to ideations and theories. Just be willing to open up to what is beyond their own theories, So when we talk about magic then, getting back to magic, magic has been a part of the human experience from the very beginning of time. Why? I don't know. That said that the world itself originated, depending on what field of thought you're coming from, even if it's the Big Bang Theory, it originated from nothingness. What was that nothingness? Right? Started with one vibration according to Hindu belief. That was the vibration. Then it started with one sound, the Big Bang, according to, the Big Bang Theory. Let's start with light, according to Genesis. So we see so many different theories all pointing to the same thing. Beyond what we see and understand as physical matter is something else. And that something else is magic. Or at least our tapping into that something else is magic. When I tap into the parts of my brain, let's go back to the brain and physical, you want to say consciousness in the brain. I don't believe that, but just say you do believe that. And again, my belief, right? I have to prove my belief in order for it to be going from a belief to a hypothesis, from a hypothesis to a theory, and from a theory to truth, right? So it's a big process. I say I believe that consciousness is outside the brain. But say if it's inside the brain, say the brain, how much of our brain are we using? We still, to this day, even neuroscientists are discovering how complicated that gray matter is, how complicated the amygdala is, how complicated, we've at one point in history, the pineal gland was, some people say pineal, I don't care how you pronounce it, it was so a part of culture and society. You see it in buildings. You see that pine cone in buildings. You've seen it everywhere. There was this reverence to that. At the same time, yogis were saying this was the third eye, It was, and then in Qi, it's the upper dantian, in some Chinese philosophies. So here we are with this idea of the brain that is so limited. Science is constantly coming up with new things about what the brain can do, how much we're using, how much we're not using. So we know the brain, which I believe, again, a belief I can't prove, that is just simply a filter for consciousness to come through. There is something coming through my brain. It's a receiver for my consciousness, which is all around me, and energy, the Qi that is all around me, the Shakti that is all around me, the Prana, which is a life energy, all around and in me. So it is a transmitter that picks up that energy. It is a transmitter that picks up that vibrating knowledge of life that I have yet to understand with this very, very, very limited little brain, right? I'm, as Einstein said, a little kid going into this library of massive books, and I can't even understand the books. I'm written in so many different languages, and there's so many of them, and they're organized in such a way. How could anyone organize them so well? And I know that somebody wrote them and somebody organized them, and they're there. Who or what did that? That is the magic I refer to. Magic to me is anything I've yet to understand conceptually. Magic to me is my connection to going beyond conceptualization to another type of knowing. Some people might call it intuition, I don't know. But a type of knowing that has been there, will always be there, and I just get to tap into it with my limited little physical body and my limited little, mind, the personal slice of mind I get to use while I'm here as a tool to help me, I believe, again, it's a belief, I can't prove it, to tap into the reality of who I really am and what this is all about. So that's magic, and it's magical. Exploring the deeper recesses of consciousness is magical. It's exciting. It fills me with something because it's like I'm going back home to understand where my home was. I'm returning. I'm not inventing something new. It's not inventing some woo-woo nonsense. I'm returning to what I've always known, and there's comfort in that. And there's excitement in that. You're coming home after a long trip and you're so close to your house and you can see the fence posts and, just get that feeling in your belly, okay, I'm coming home. And that's what magic does to me, this understanding of magic. I guess there's different names for magic these days. Like I said, supernatural, metaphysical. Supernatural to me, anything, the natural world, we see things growing and whatnot. To me, nature is the most magical thing there is. The human body is the most magical thing there is. But, natural world, what is phenomena around us? Super means above or beyond that. So it's like, okay, what is beyond what I'm seeing in my natural environment? Metaphysical, physical referring to physics and referring to physicality. Meta means around, beyond, behind that. What is behind that? What is pushing that from behind? What is motivating that from behind? Then we have paranormal. Para, again, means around, what's surrounding the normal that we cannot yet see. And normal, again, is a word that we have to be very cautious with. Just because something is normal doesn't mean that it's reality. Just because something is normal doesn't mean it's healthy. It's the only way of looking at things. It's just what most of the people are doing. Most of the people think now, because of the scientific revolution since Newtonian physics, that everything is matter, right? So we've branched away from our belief in the occult, which just simply means hidden, or the metaphysical, and narrowed our view into scientific Newtonian physics, and from there onto Darwinian and onto all the other different types of physics that different types of understandings of science that we've gone on to. So we've been, constricting and constricting our worldview and our perspective away from that which cannot be seen, heard, touched, felt, smelt, to that which could only, with the tools that we have at the time, be validated with those instruments. So that became our viewpoint and our way of seeing life. So when we talk about metaphysical, what is beyond that? As Aristotle, explored after studying physics for so many, many years. What is that beyond that makes the physical, that makes the physics work? What are those bosons, leptons, quarks, and that Higgs field, and beyond the Higgs field? We're only there yet because that's the only tools we have to explore that yet. But the scientific mind, when it really, really wants to know, really wants to question, goes beyond that into the magic of existence. And that's what it is. Magic is all science, Alchemy, the process of turning, I don't know what kind of unprecious metals into precious metals. It was apparently a really real thing back in the days. That process of turning what we don't understand into something we understand is quite magical, as far as I'm concerned anyway. So what I was trying to say is that paraphenomenon is now called psi phenomena. We had to branch away from parapsychology because science had a fit. After a while, they didn't want any associating science that was holding on to their beliefs for comfort's sake, holding on to it for, to validate their understanding of things so they didn't feel all discombobulated again, and wanted science to be separate from everything else, which it isn't. It's probably more magical than anything else, but still we have these scientists that are just holding on to their beliefs, pushing away anything that questions or tests those beliefs, or takes them beyond those beliefs. That's science. And one thing they do that with is psi phenomenon. And Dean Radin, I'm sure I'm pronouncing his name right, but wrote a wonderful book, The Science of the Mind. Now, he has been researching psi phenomenon, that type of phenomenon that Western scientists and some very conventional and conservative scientists would call woo-woo. He's been experimenting and testing it and getting all this amazing evidence for it, documenting it in scientific journals. And still, to this day, after years of doing it, and his testing is more rigorous than most scientists you will see. Very, very rigorous. Like, you just read this book and you'll see how rigorous his studies have been and how well documented they were, because they had to prove something, right? They didn't have to, but they just wanted to prove that there was something beyond this, and they really had to set the science community straight. But the more they did these tests, those conventional scientists who still run the show, unfortunately, in many cases, were saying, no, we're not going to go there. That's hogwash. It can't be true because it can't be true. And they would be debunking their tests without scientifically challenging them by doing tests that would, show evidence against what they were doing. They were just literally debunking them. They were just saying can't be, so therefore it can't be, right? Instead of investigating. So this book is amazing in showing you how there is a science behind the metaphysical. There is a science behind this thing that we do not understand. This thing called consciousness, especially the hard problem of consciousness. And I think that's where we have to go to explore magic, is what is consciousness? And where does it originate from? And how do we utilize it? How do we step back into it? How do we connect with it? Because most of us have this veil, and some of us very thick veil between explore it and between the physical world and the metaphysical world. There's this veil, this ignorance, this conviction of belief, this refusal and resistance to see what could be beyond that veil. And so we're wearing this veil around us as our psyches, and that's how we're operating and seeing the world. And of course, that leads to resistance to what could be out there. It leads to us refusing to explore what could be out there beyond what we've come to know as reality, especially when it comes to consciousness. So it's like, let's explore consciousness. You want to look at magic? Let's explore consciousness. You want to call it psi phenomenon? You go ahead, you call it psi. You want to call it science? You go ahead, you call it science. You call it physics because it is hardcore physics. When we get down to it, consciousness is hardcore physics, right? The observer effect, and double split theory, this non-locality, this entanglement. What even Einstein called, what did he call it? Spooky science at a distance. Because he's seen it, the reality of it, but how do you explain it? And unless you're willing to explore it deeper, once you see this spooky science and explore it deeper to find out what's beyond it, you're never going to know, right? But most scientists are afraid the spooky part makes them back off and say, no, I can't be real. Rather than using the scientific mind, the questioning mind, to go further into it, as Aristotle did and as many others have done over the years. So there's more than physical matter in this world. So when you ask me, do you believe in magic? My belief, yes, it's still not founded on scientific validation and evidence. Well, there is a lot, as I'm discovering here. There is a lot more than I realized that I could, put into my dogma bank and say, yeah, I can prove that. Or it has been proven. Or it's in a way, on its way to be proven, is once we get the tools that can go beyond what we have now to explore these other issues that most mainstream science is refusing to explore, then we can get the evidence clearly. And it's said that within the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to get that evidence. And once it starts happening, it's going to happen so that everybody's going to know, say in 20 years, that, yeah, magic is real. We'll have a different name for it maybe. And we'll have a different understanding what magic is. It won't be this woo-woo, spooky science at a distance. It won't be, ghosty stuff, even though we'll have a different understanding and a different interpretation of it and a different way of looking at it. So it won't be so spooky. And when that happens, then, wow, those of us who said, yeah, I believe in magic, can say, Dad, I told you. No, I'm just joking. But yes, I just believe there's so much we do not know. And I'm open to knowing it all. And if I close my mind and say, no, there's no such thing as magic, or I do not believe in magic, I am closing up to the wonderful mysteries that life has to offer us. I'm hoping I made sense. How long have I talked? Whoa, 30 minutes. Forgive me. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have an amazing day. Namaste.